Welcome back to the Art and Science of Computer Technology. Today's lesson will be on Python loops. Notes. Loops repeatedly execute a block of code. Watch out for infinite loops, loops where the completion condition can never be met. Else of a for loop has more in common with the else of a try statement than an if statement. If the else statement is used with a for loop, the else statement is executed when the loop has exhausted iterating the list. If the else statement is used with a while loop, the else statement is executed when the condition becomes false. So a little bit long there, but it should make sense later on. Just go ahead and read it a few times. A lot of it is terms that we haven't really covered, like a try statement, for instance, isn't even going to be covered until the unit or the lesson about exceptions. But if you already have some programming experience, you should be able to make sense just by reading it over once or twice. Types of loops: while loops, for loops, and nested loops. For while loops, it repeats a statement or group of statements as long as a certain condition is true. Tests the condition before executing the loop body. For loops executes a sequence of statements multiple times and abbreviates the code that manages the loop variable. So a lot of those are going to be either you're going over a string or through a list or something like that. Also things that are going to be covered in future lessons. And nested loops are simply loops inside of loops. So it could be a while loop inside of a while loop inside of a while loop. For loops. Python's for statement iterates over the items of any sequence, a list or a string, in the order that they appear in the sequence. Iterating over the sequence doesn't implicitly create a copy, but slice notation makes creating copies particularly convenient. Use range for iterating over a sequence of numbers, which makes it really easy to just create a blank list if you ever have use for that, and that'll be one of the examples as well. Control statements: break, continue, and pass. Break, as in C, breaks out of the innermost enclosing for or while loop. Continue, as with C, continues on to the next iteration of the loop. Pass, does nothing. Can be used when a statement is required syntactically, but the program requires no action. So again, that's kind of the same, it's the exact same thing as the no out pass from the previous lesson. Moving on to the example code. Quick overview for anybody who wants to read it ahead of time. Alright, so import time for the use of the sleep function. Importing has to deal with modules and packages and all that kind of stuff, which is also a future lesson. But for now, just know that we need to import time so that we can use this sleep function over here. So you call it with this and then dot, and then here's the actual function. So it'll be the time module or the file. Basically the module is just going to be the file without the extension. But anyways, future lesson. So x is equal to 0 while x is less than 20. Print x. X gets plus and equal to 1. This is just going to increment x by 1. I'm pretty sure Python doesn't have... Oh, wait, actually. So it does. Alright, so anyways. So here's what we just printed out. X gets equal to 0 while... So x is currently 0, and then it's going to start this loop, and then every single time that it goes over, it'll reach the end of the loop right here between the else and this last statement. So as long as this condition is true, it's going to keep doing another loop cycle. So you're going to print x, and then you're going to increment x, and then eventually it'll reach 20, as you can see over here, and then it will finally print done, which refers back to that long thing that we were talking about with all the else's and the if statements and the while loops. This is where the else comes in. So once we finally reach this terminating condition, then the else is going to execute, and that's why it prints done over here. So just to show what the infinite loop is, I have the example here if you want to read it real fast, but rather than going and xing out everything and going through all that, I'm just going to change this to the opposite, or change this to a negative. And then there we go. And since x is going to constantly be decreasing rather than increasing, it will never reach this 20. So run that, and as you can see, very quickly it just goes up to whatever thousands of numbers it's at. So that, if you're dealing with something that's just a simple terminal and just a few lines of text, Probably won't create too much of a problem, but if you're dealing with something that has to do with graphics and all that kind of stuff, which uses a lot of memory, you could quickly crash your system just with an infinite loop. So something to be aware of there. So let's see here. Let's cancel out all of these and move on to the next examples. Alright, so here's the infinite loop. I guess I'll go through this one just because here you can see while true, so obviously that's always going to evaluate to true. So if we just leave that as it is, then let's run that real fast and see what happens. See, it'll just keep printing. So that one was obvious because there was no math whatsoever. It was just static. It wrote true. And if you wanted to have it never execute, you can just type false. And then when we run it, it doesn't do anything because it just stays false. So that's all covered. I can just kind of leave that there. Moving on to over here now. Alright, so x is going to be 10, y is going to be 20, and then while x is less than y, here's another infinite loop number 2, so we're going to turn this number and just print it as string, so that again, because you can't concatenate numbers with strings, so we have to cast this integer value into a string value so that we can print this whole statement. And then x is going to become -1, and then this one, I just added the time.sleep function so that you can see how it's just going to keep executing the way it is. So right here, just keeps decreasing, and since it's always going to be lower, it'll just keep going and going and going. So we can go ahead and comment those back out. And again, feel free to just play around with the code yourself. And alright. So here's going to be our for loop. So for x in range 10 is going to print x plus the dot. And this is what I was talking about, where you can make a list really simply. So we're just going to run that. And I guess, where are we at here? File back, line 31, print x. Alright, so this should be a number, I guess. So string, go like that. And now if we run it again, there's your list. So what the range function is going to do is basically just going to create a list starting from 0, and most things are 0 indexed. There's a really good explanation for it that I heard one time. I can't remember at the moment, but when we cover other stuff, they'll probably mention at that point. There is reasons, though. It took me forever to wonder why it had to start 0, but there are good reasons. So for x, you range, here we just go that. And this could be any sequence. So as in the next example, we're going to create this list right here, this array, and we're going to put 3 values into it: dog, cat, bird. Goes into the array words, and then for word, this can be any kind of item in words. So words, this one actually has to match up with the name of the array. So here we named it here we named it words, and this has to line up. This, on the other hand, could be anything. So you can have that. The only thing is that this one right here has to match up with this one. So again, it kind of pretty similar to how with the not the placeholders, but the parameters of functions, those have to line up. So yeah, here it is. So you can just look at that, and it should be pretty simple to figure out what goes with what. So we're going to go and run this again, and it will print dog, cat, and bird. So every single time it went through, it went and it printed the word. And we added the new line just because, but normally print will add a new line anyways. So that's why you see that big space where normally it would go otherwise. So, and if we actually go and move out the new line, run that again, you can see now it's just one space at a time. So on to nested loops, and that is going to be pretty much that. So note the indentation increase. Alright, so we got the nest x and we got the nest y, so nested x and y. Nest x is going to be 20, nest y is going to be 1, while nest x is less than 30, print nest x, and then the value of nest x. So the inside of the print statement, if you want to concatenate stuff, you don't always have to do it with the plus symbol, you can just do it with this comma, and all that's going to do is go take value by value by value and just puts that in order. And then we can also get into formatting and stuff later, which adds a little bit more versatility, but for now, between the plus symbol and this comma, it should be able to do just about everything you need to do starting off. So x plus and equal to 1. Plus and equal to 1 is just going to be a shorthand for y is equal to y plus 1. So rather than having to write all this, you can literally just write this. So you have the value, and then it will be as if you're writing x plus 1. So it just saves you from having to write the variable name twice. So we can go ahead and delete all this. And so inside of the while loop, let's just run it real fast. And we have x not defined because we have nest x, I think. Yeah. Nest x and then nest y. Nest y. Alright, so at this point, most of you can probably figure out what this does. If not, go ahead and try to run it or just look at the example. And you're going to go loop through all these, and pretty simple. Let me see if I can just stay on that. Okay, so we're going to loop this, and then as long as this is true, it's going to go through the entire while loop. But once we hit this while loop, we're going to have to go through this one a bunch, and then when this while loop is complete, then we finally continue on with the original while loop. And since this one's going to be already completed by the time it runs through, that's why we start here, which is going to line up with this while loop over here. So this while loop reaches this while loop, and then while we're in this while loop, we execute nest y all these times, and then we finally break out of that loop. But because nest y maintains the value from the incrementing, this one's not going to be executed anymore from there. So then we finally finish up with all the nest x loops, and that's all for that. So I do believe that is that for this lesson. Thank you very much, and have a great day.